SN8.
One, two, three, four, five. Is the mic on? And can you hear me? There's an OBS update on the server apparently, and it has made our audio not happy. Always audio issues. You think at some point. Chat, let me know, can you hear me? And do you only get one of me right now? You should only hear one copy of DOS, even though the OBS update seems to be saying it's giving you two copies, but hopefully it's not actually doing that. We're just going to go ahead and roll with it and see what we can do. Just one copy. All right. So if I clap, whatever, we'll see if it's good or not good or whatever. Maybe there's a slight sync to it or whatever. We'll play with that on the fly and see if I can clean it up. We're going to do some NSF live first here, and I'm going to stop talking and introduce these other people so I can work on the audio sync. I know that I can make a slight change to that and try to fix it. With me today, look, I'll just do this and you can't tell if it's synced or not. Over on this side, Chris B at NASASpaceflight. Chris, how's it going today?
Good evening.
Let's see, is that just one? All right, cool. And then on the other side, we've got Chris G. I'm surrounded by Chris's. Chris, talk, but cover your mouth so they can't tell if it's in sync or not.
Hello, hello, hello.
We need to all wear masks or something like that. This isn't a mask. This is like a kitchen pot holder, but whatever. Anyways, I will dial in the audio sync in just a second while these two nerds are talking. We're gonna do NSF live. We don't have any specific order or anything like that, but a lot of stuff has been happening. Chris, what are we talking about today? Take it away. Go with it.
Which one should I go first?
Tell you what, Chris, go ahead.
You know what we should start with? We should start with Starship, because I think that's what everyone always likes coming back to. And we will keep coming back to it throughout the show, because Starship, you can't go wrong. There's always something happening. People on Twitter always say, why are you always talking about SpaceX and Starship? Nothing else. Well, first of all, we do talk about everything else. The second thing is that's what the news is all about. It's always something happening with Starship, that we have always something to talk about. And I think right now, for the past 2 weeks, I've been writing articles which have been previewing the second phase of static fire tests. And now, finally, we're into that window where we're going to get these 3 static fire tests. We're going to get, first of all, we're going to get one engine firing via the header tank. The header tanks, if you don't know, are the 2 small tanks inside Starship. One is the liquid methane tank inside the actual Starship itself, which we've seen with the mass simulators on top and what have you. This is the first time with a LOX header tank, which is on the nose cone, because it's the first Starship with a nose cone, apart from Mark 1. So we're going to see is one Raptor firing up. Then we'll see a second static fire with 2 Raptors firing up, both from the header tank. And then finally, we'll get an full 3 Raptor static fire tests from the main tanks. The reason why they're going to redo that test, which they've already done, is to allow them to check out the engine changes, because they changed out SN39 Raptor with SN36. It's technically a new 3-set Raptor. So they're going to do a full 3 Raptor test. And if that goes well, then we're waiting for the date for the launch, the 15-kilometer launch. And that could be coming within a week at the very earliest. We're all dismissing that now because we think they'll go for Crew 1 launch first. And after Crew 1 launch has been successfully docked with the ISS, we'll probably get an announcement from SpaceX or Elon saying right into a 3 days time, we're going to do this Starship test. And that's when things get interesting. So we've got a lot to look forward to. At this point, really... do I keep talking? Tell you what, Chris, I'll ask you while you're on here.
Hey, Chad, is that a little bit better?
We're going to do a dance check first.
No. I got to mute that whenever we're doing that, because when I'm listening back to the actual play, I have to switch that. Is that better? I think that should be a little bit better now in terms of the matching of the audio to the video. With the OBS hiccup, with the update that seems to have messed up our audio, that I think that the way we've hacked it together seems like it's not too terrible. Chris, look at the camera. Both, like Chris B, look at the camera and just clap real quick.
I feel like I'm doing a dance.
That was terrible. All right.
Okay.
Just keep talking. Just keep talking.
I can say in real life, it looked really good. Yeah, we were talking about Starship rather than doing sync tests. So let's keep Let's keep this going on Starship before this becomes a webcast of legends where they go back and go, these guys here, what they're doing? What are they up to?
All right.
But yeah, Starship, we've been doing these articles once. I've been doing these articles once every Sunday to round up where things are, because Mary does all these amazing videos. And we do like a video a night every night of Starship, and it's just good for people to catch up on once a week. This Sunday, I don't think we'll need to do one because we previewed a static fire test completely, and now we're into static fire testing. So the next article will be to mark the start of the static fire test, which we hope will come tomorrow. Now, when they do static fire tests, they give Mary a letter on her door because she lives in Boca Chica Village. The people who remain in Boca Chica Village get these letters saying, we're going to do a test this time. Be always outside because she's doing a test webcast. But they give a preview of when a static fire test is going to take. So we're hoping we'll get a notification from Mary tonight saying that Sunday there'll be a window from like 9 a.m. till 5 p.m. where there's the police siren at T-minus 10 minutes, and then we get an idea of when we're going to get a static fire test. So that's what we're hoping for next, is tomorrow during the day they're going to do a static fire test with one Raptor engine. We'll see how we go from there. And the other thing, Chris, is we're just looking at past Starship. We'll come back to that because we'll get a lot of questions about Starship, but also we'll get also a preview of what else is coming up, because I think we've done a lot of news this week. I was started off by saying people say we're going to talk about Starship. We don't. We talk about lots of things, including lots of other news. And I would say we could include the latest news you wrote up recently, Chris, about the Northrop Grumman human lander system, which I can then dovetail back into about Starship. So I'll let you talk about Northrop Grumman's bed, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, because this is where we're starting to see a lot of movement on those initial round of contracts, right? The contracts that were out in April or announced in April, which chose the national team with Blue Origin, Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin, and Draper, SpaceX with their Starship vehicle, and one other company as well. We have been waiting for some concrete information on how those other elements are doing, because we can see the progress that SpaceX is making with Starship every single day, as you were alluding to with those videos with Mary. But Northrop and some of the others were very much in that behind the scenes, the things taking place in buildings and software development labs, in meetings between the three organizations about how exactly the national team lander system is going to work. And this week we were able to talk with Sally Richardson, the program director for the human landing system for specifically the transfer element for the national team's lunar lander design. And one of the great things that came out of this, so they're about halfway through the 10-month contract. This will wrap up. And one of the things that they have already gotten to, right? So they have done some of their stage readiness reviews on the particular elements, and the transfer element review was completed on the 8th of October with an independent review team. They got a lot of good feedback on that. Again, this is specifically talking about just the transfer element, not the descent and ascent elements, which are from Blue Origin and Lockheed Martin. Northrop was talking solely about this transfer element. So they're through some of their initial reviews. They have their next major milestone coming up is the integrated lander preliminary design review between all three of the major programs, as well as Draper for the flight and landing software and avionics. And that preliminary integrated review will come in December. And then by late January, the transfer element itself will be through its preliminary design review before the first 10-month part of the contract wraps at the end of February. They have also completed a simulated docking at their docking proximity and rendezvous facility at Dulles, Virginia. So they used a 7 metric ton or 7,000 kilogram mass simulator for the descent element and a 14,000 kilogram mass simulator for the transfer element, and proved out some of the initial software builds for the ability for the systems to perform automated docking in near rectilinear halo orbit, a huge part of the national team system, because all three of the elements, the transfer element, the descent element, and the ascent element, will launch on separate vehicles, get themselves out to near rectilinear halo orbit, and then the transfer element will first dock with the descent element, and then dock the descent element and itself to the ascent element before the Orion is then cleared with its crew to launch for this first landing attempt in 2024. And of course, a lot of the milestones that we were talking about with Sally in that interview that's published on NASASpaceflight.com has to do specifically with that first achievable landing goal, which is the 2024 lunar lander goal that NASA currently has a deadline to meet. So all of that was sort of wrapped up in the meeting the 2024 deadline. What's really exciting here, and where you can see some of the synergies starting to come into play from other Northrop Grumman programs and what they have inherited from Orbital and ATK as well, is that this docking system that they're going to use to dock the transfer element to the descent element, as well as dock the descent element to the ascent element, is derived from their mission extension vehicles, which have been in the news in the past year for MEV-1, Mission Extension Vehicle 1 and 2, from Northrop Grumman, both launching to go up to geostationary orbiting satellites that were running low on propellant and running low on the ability to keep themselves stabilized. And these mission extension vehicles have to dock to vehicles that were never intended to be docked with, let alone at the altitudes that we're talking about in geostationary orbit. And with both of those, and with the first mission being a complete success with its docking, and the second one coming up for docking here in a couple of months to its target, the MEV technology is what the entire national team has chosen to move forward for the integration of their lander systems. So it was a really, really good update that, they're making excellent progress. It's not just the training simulator that they have delivered to the Johnson Space Center that they're making progress on, really making good strides in the integration of the entirety of the system here, with a special focus, obviously, since we were talking Northrop Grumman, on that transfer element. So a lot is coming together across the board for the Artemis program, not just what we're seeing with the testing of Starship down in Texas, but going on in simulators and software development labs and actual hardware build, as well as design reviews between all the teams for the national team approach to the human lunar landing systems.
What I find interesting is that a lot of the internal chatter, which is quite competitive between the actual elements who are involved in this bid, have all cited that Starship has got nothing concrete on table. It's all on paper. And then within a week, the Starship people started painting this spare nose cone at Boca Chica in white and a NASA logo on it. It was hilarious. It was literally a week after there was a kind of like, we've got mock-ups, they haven't. And suddenly someone got a paintbrush out in Boca Chica and they've got a mock-up. And yeah, it's not just a paint job. They're actually putting it on the stand now, and they're going to put some internal workings into it. They're going to put cut windows into it. So it will look like a human landing system Starship mock-up, and they will then probably make that on top of SN5, we think. So that will then get painted white, and they will have a lunar Starship that technically be better than mock-up that Blue Origin and likes have got, because that will be on a hopped SN5 Starship, which has actually gone into the air. So it'd be hilarious to see how far they'll progress that. But that's where SpaceX are with their bid. We all think SpaceX are favorites, but with NASA contracts, you've got to acknowledge there's a lot of lobbying that goes on. Before anyone says it, SpaceX do have lobbyists. It's just that Boeing and the likes have a lot more. So
well,
that's how it works.
And you might see, to the point that you were making about like, the sort of, I don't really know what to call it, the sort of like jabs that companies in any type of a competition make with one another about how far along they actually are in the process. What I can say, regardless of what the public impression is, regardless of what you hear people saying on Twitter or whatever, Northrop Grumman does take this very, very seriously. To Northrop Grumman, and this came up multiple times in our interview, they were very clear, like, this is a competition. Some of the things that we were asking for that they'll be able to talk about later on, they didn't want to talk about because they didn't want the competition to know exactly where they were in the proposal phase or exactly what their proposal might be. So there might be posturing on a public facing side and some back and forth on exactly how far these companies are. But from Northrop Grumman's standpoint, they are taking this very, very seriously as the competition that it is to return human beings to the moon, or if you're not the company that does that, to be part of that sustainable long-term goal that I know is very important to Jim Bridenstine and to NASA and all the agencies around the world who have signed on to the Artemis program in some way.
I do hope that without going political, we've been trying to discuss things without going political, that with the changing landscape, we will see a progression of this current roadmap that Jim Burdenstein's brought to it, because I find it brilliant. I think when NASA was saying they were looking at Mars as the goal, Mars, 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 they were so far away from achieving that target that it was going to be several landscape changes politically before they even got to that date. So that always risks it with funding changes, what have you. With the gateway and the human landing system, with the commercial partnerships and the international partnerships that have been built already, there is no reason to scrap that. They can just go forward with
Exactly.
it, and hopefully with the groundwork's being laid, have a viable path to making it happen. And I think that's only going to be good if that happens. And I do think that's what they'll do. They'll go forward with. I do think they'll stay with the plan, and that will hopefully be some testament to Jim Bernstein, who, according to Eric Berger, is leaving anyway. Be it politically changing, or be it even if it stayed the same, he was on his way out, which is a real great shame, because I think he's been the best NASA administrator we've seen at NASA, especially in my time. I keep thinking about Dan Golding, but I think I just got starry-eyed about X-33. But that was that time he was in charge. But especially in the recent years, he's been the best NASA administrator we've had, and hopefully whoever takes over will just stay the course, because he's set up a lot of good things.
I can only echo that 100%. I've been following the stories that seems to indicate that regardless of who won the U.S. presidential election, that Jim was leaving, regardless of if that was a second term for President Trump or a new term, as it definitely appears it will be under President Biden. You know, of all the things, the NASA administrator is never the most important, which we've seen throughout history in terms of when the new administrators are chosen, and of course when administrators choose to leave, especially with a transition. I point out that there's hasn't really been an appetite in the U.S. Senate to get rid of SLS or mess with it. In terms of funding, I don't foresee that changing with our political landscape that it looks like we will have come January 4th and then January 21st in the US. And also as a point of reminder, because I have seen quite a few people concerned about SLS, it's important to remember that Vice President Biden was vice president under President Obama when the SLS program was born. Right, when there was that shift away from Project Constellation, which had its problems that were pre-existing before they came in. They were the administration that took that and made the SLS program and started it down the path of what it is today and what we see coming to fruition. And it's not a lie to say what we see coming to fruition. There is a core stage on that test stand at Stennis that will be fired up. It's endured a lot of hurricanes this year, more so than we ever thought. But it'll fire up hopefully by the end of the year, if not shortly thereafter. We have the booster hardware here. We have Orion. We have everything coming together. I don't think there's a huge appetite in an incoming administration to change this, but I would also argue that there's probably a very similar, if not greater, appetite to expand funding if Congress can go along with it, to the commercial era, which has been, and of course the funding issues have been across the board. There's no one particular party that deserves the lion's share of blame or whatever for that. It's part of politics and how things get funded. But I think it's way early to talk about concrete elements that will happen, but I think you can go back and judge by who the administration was that began SLS and commercial era stuff, and you can kind of get a sense of how that might continue. Of course, a lot of that will have to do with who the eventual NASA administrator is. Personally, I'd love to see Jim Bridenstine stay. I always said when he was chosen that I would give him a chance, and my word, has he proven what a great administrator he is for NASA. So I would certainly hope he would stay, but as you said, Chris, it certainly doesn't seem like that was going to happen regardless of whatever the outcome it was to our election over here.
And it's quite an interesting thing, because you mentioned that that Biden was involved with SLS. What, really? But of course he was the he was the vice president during the time that the Obama administration cancelled Constellation. and
Right.
moved on to SLS. I don't know why I keep forgetting that, but it really is. It was an amazing period because Constellation, I always bring up a joke, and there's people who are writers who don't like me doing this, but we keep mentioning how Ares was a mess. Ares was a mess. I'm sorry, it was.
Yes.
It was a complete mess. And although Obama completely messed up the way that he cancelled Constellation because he cancelled everything, literally outright, even cancelled Orion before bringing it back as a lifeboat on the ISS, he did eventually get the politician side of things. Again, I'm going to be careful here because it was literally the Senate that designed the space launch
Mhm.
system with the requirements of using Ares and shuttle technology. But SLS is a good rocket. It's not reusable. It costs so much, and the schedule's gone to pot. So that's where a lot of people say. But we are now in the business end of SLS. This is the interesting thing now. We've got this article up right now, which is talking about the green run issues. They are close. They're close to the wet dress rehearsal, close to the green run. It was meant to be this month. It won't be this month. It won't be next month, I don't think. People are saying now SLS have officially said they hope by the end of the year. A lot of us don't think it will be that soon because they have what's called a pre-valve issue. That is something that happened before this Hurricane Zeta skimmed the area. It didn't really hit. It skimmed the area where the test stand was, and there was no damage, thankfully. But of course, to any English person who's not experienced a hurricane skimming you is still bad. So you got to appreciate it. There's a lot of things that can go wrong with a hurricane in the area. So it did survive. Everything went through well. There's been no damage apart from some facility damage where there's been tiles off roofs and what have you. But they're now preparing for the green run. The green run is going through several steps. They got to test stage 5, which was the thrust vector control system. We do believe they had issues with that, but they've got around the issues by recreating the thrust vector control system parameters in what's called the MSFC lab, which is the Marshall Space Flight Center lab. And that's where they can now validate saying the thrust vector control system is fine. We can now move on to test 6, which is the wet dress rehearsal. Try saying that with your teeth in. That is now going to be coming up, hopefully, as a prelude to the green run test itself. When the WDR is done, we know the next stage is the green run test, where all 4 engines will fire up. What I want to bring up is the thrust vector control system is, we've got a picture of this hurricane, and we can bring it down to show the actual valves. We can just scroll that down, Daz. Now, there you see there's very few pictures of the actual valves themselves because they're proprietary information, but they are just those little sections there at the bottom of the tank, which is now covered obviously with the full core stage tank itself. One of those valves has got a problem. They're going to have to replace it. The problem is access. When it's on the actual test stand, they'll have to open up the actual core stage to get to that valve and replace it. And that's where delay is involved. So that has got to be replaced before the WDR, and then they can go through the static fire run. But the thrust vector control system is very important. If you're new to rockets, you might think things like shuttle steer with the wings when they're launching. They're not. The wings are only involved in the last part of landing. They are not involved in the launch. Everything to do with the rocket launch with its steering is what's called thrust vector control. It literally moves the nozzle backwards and forwards and steers the exhaust, and that's what changes the direction of the rocket. The thrust vector control system for SLS is 4 engines are moving all once, and the SRBs have got nozzles which move as well, and that will direct the stack uphill and towards orbit, and that has to work. If that doesn't work properly, you're going to lose your rocket. So that is why the thrust vector control system is such a major test, and why they need to have that properly working. But yeah,
And
hopefully. Sorry, you're going to say something?
oh well, like to that point, right? And how critical the thrust vector control system can be to the stability of the rocket. We really have to look no further than the Ariane 5 from the European
Yeah.
Space Agency and from Arianespace, which on its very first flight back in 1996, it was a software issue that made it think it was at a different point in its flight profile, but it triggered the thrust vector control system to very quickly move the engines to get the vehicle into the proper position it thought it needed to be for the point in flight it thought it was in. It was just way too close to the ground, and the aerodynamic forces instantly broke the Ariane 5 apart when the thrust vector control system skewed the vehicle so quickly. So very, very critical system to maintaining, like you were saying, that correct attitude during flight.
And the other thing is, with the thrust vector control system, it's actually quite hilarious because if you look at it, it's a massive steel arm. That's all it literally is on hydraulics. It literally is. If you go to a DIY shop or a hardware shop and literally just buy something, a small version of it, it'd be like a massive arm, big steel arm, and it pulls the nozzle backwards and forwards. That's all it is. Literally pulling it backwards and forwards, which makes it steer on a gimbal. And that's all it is. That's what they call it gimbaling sometimes when they're testing the engines. They'll call it a gimbal check because that's what it's. The thrust vector control arm is pulling the gimbal and moving the nozzle. That's all it is. There's a brilliant video. I should have put it into the links before we start talking this conversation, but there's a brilliant video from Mary where she shows Starhopper's one Raptor doing a TVC check, and it's literally wobbling around. And I forget her name, Abby on Twitter did a wiggle it video version of it where it's sped up and it's literally does like it's wagging its tail. That's what thrust vector control is. It's hilarious.
I've actually got a video that I'm going to throw up into the control net. It's not the one you're specifically talking about, but it is from the SpaceX. It is SpaceX doing a thrust vector control system
Excellent, yeah.
test back in 2010. Yeah, and that's up in yeah, there we go.
Frequency sweep.
It's about halfway through the video that the test begins, DOS, if you want to. Yeah. And then I'm also going to throw up the SLS specific one of them doing that test on the core stage engines, because I think that's so funny to see one engine wiggle at the same time. Yeah.
Because that is also the test. We don't think went to plan. We do believe there were some parameter issues with that test, and that's why they had to repeat it on the models in the lab at Marshall Space Flight Center. SLS has never admitted to that, but yes, there's a certain amount of wiggling going on there.
Yeah, and DOS, if we can grab the other SLS video too, because you can really see how quickly the thrust vector control system on this one can move those engines. This is not sped up. This is real time.
Yeah, real time.
And you can, so you can see how quickly they can respond. Which, when you think about it, this is something we never get to see in flight, right? But when we talk about wind shear, when we talk about upper level winds, right, and the ability of the rocket to counteract that, what we're really talking about is, in some ways, is the ability of the thrust vector control system that you're seeing here to move the engines quick enough to counter the difference in trajectory that's being induced by those upper level winds, but not completely fast enough that it flips the rocket over because of how quickly it can actually respond if needed.
I wonder if we get any questions relating to all this, because I do see some questions coming in. I don't think we've read any questions out yet.
We have not. We do have a couple on SLS that I'm seeing here, including one of, do we know about the next two SLS core stages and how they are coming along? That's asked by Johnny Thunder to us.
Yeah, I do know that CS2 is in math right now, and it's pretty much, I should say, 2/3 done. It's certainly all the sections are done. It needs to go through that mating process where they make it into one full core stage, but it has been done. And I do know they've been working on welding on parts for the third one, which will be currently projected to be the one that takes humans to the moon. Because, of course, the first Artemis 1 mission is going to be uncrewed. The second one is going to be crewed, but just around the moon. And the third one will be to the gateway and then to land on the moon. So we do think that the gateway element will be behind Artemis 3. So it may be just like a staging post rather than anything proper. But and they may go a different route with the human landing system where they dock with that instead of docking with the gateway. It's all about schedule and how they can do it now. So I think that's up in the air. But that's where they are at math. They're actually at core stage 3, which is technically Artemis 3 because they did a structural test article and what have you. So we'll be seeing how far they progress with that. But they're in line. They're on track as far as the core stages go.
Yeah, and of course we also have the RS-25Es, the 4 of them that we're looking at. They're undergoing their gimbaling tests and everything. We also have those for the next 2 core stages and core stages beyond them. Actually, Northrop Grumman is in SRB procurement and casting and build operations for those as well. So the sort of cadence that they need, I think, is going to really be predicated on how quickly core stage 2 and core stage 3 can come off the assembly lines in MAF, taking into account all the lessons learned as they went through core stage 1.
Gotcha.
Being a driver for those schedules, and of course the development of the lander systems, because one thing we really don't talk about a lot in the push toward the landing goal in 2024 is, so much of our focus has been on SLS, and the core stage being the long pole item for the first flight of this rocket. But we have spacesuit development that's still ongoing. We have lander systems that have not flown yet that need testing as well. We have some lander systems that have performed some flights. We're sort of all over the board on where all the companies are with the proposed landers. And I think my biggest caution to a 2024 goal of landing on the moon it isn't necessarily Orion, it's the landers, and will they be ready in time to support that? And I think a large part of what you might see here is maybe a change in how we talk about that 2024 date as not necessarily a mandate for which it has to happen, but a good, hard, but technically and safely achievable goal that we'll still aim for. But maybe if we don't get there by 2024, it's not a mandate.
Right.
That's what we'll aim for, and we hope we can do it safely, and we'll still try to do it, but we're not going to be upset if that slips into 2025, basically.
Okay. So I'm hanging in there. Y'all can hear me right now, right?
We can, yes.
Okay, good. That's good. I don't know if the stream can hear me. Apparently the stream should be able to hear me, but who knows? Stream, tell me if you can't hear me. Chasing down all sorts of little hiccups here for some reason, but if y'all have other things, I'm sort of scrambling to try and find the right stuff to bring up as we talk about different stuff. So if there's anything that I haven't brought up, Chris, just like tell me to bring it up really quickly, because I'm juggling a lot of stuff here.
Well, I think I'll just do a quick catch up. Thanks to Michael passing on the panel. We can read out some support here. We've got Andy Lowe, who joined as a new member.
There you
We've
go.
got Kemper News Network with $30. This is to help everything you guys do. Crew 1 coming up. Yeah, we've got a lot of plans for Crew 1.
Yeah.
There'll be a lot of effort. So yeah, thanks very much. Steve Rapoli, who I've known from Twitter quite a lot of time. He's a new member. I recognise his name. Rusty Cam with £2. Fellow English person, or UK, I should say. Evening, guys. Nice to hear you all. Angie Handover with $5. Money is tight, but there's little. Here's a little. Thanks for all you do. Got to stop depressing feelings. Be careful there. I'm going to get political. You're going to get me reading out political messages, so I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to thank you. Yeah, I was reading like 3 words in advance there. That's why I stuttered, and I thought, oh no, stop.
Nope.
But I appreciate the support,
off.
yeah. And I'm sure other people who read that when it come in chat may agree or disagree with you. So there you go. Thank you.
Indeed, and we to Kemper News Network there for your mention on Crew 1. That is sort of our big focus coming up this week. We know we notionally also have an NRO flight on the range for no earlier than the 11th out of here, but Crew 1 is definitely the big one, with a potentially rather big question mark as to what might happen. I don't know if we're done with SLS, but I heard Crew 1 and I thought that might be a good segue.
Do you have a graphic for that, like that I can bring up for Crew 1?
We do have a graphic.
I'm looking. What's it called?
I threw it in our links folder. It's probably not the graphic people want to see.
Is it the tropical storm one? Is that the one?
It is indeed. It is indeed the tropical storm one.
All right, I worked that out myself. It says tropical storm ETA. So there you go, Chris. All right.
Yeah. So here's the ETA on ETA. Joke courtesy of Nathan Barker yesterday. Which, as you can see, is sort of a good luck Florida map through next week. It's very rare that we see a storm performing a very rocket-specific S-curve maneuver through the Caribbean and the Gulf, or as a wayward plane pointed out yesterday, forming in the shape of an S for scrub. But here it is. There's some uncertainty in the path. The path has shifted northward as of the latest advisory that they did at the 10 a.m. Central, 11 a.m. Eastern update from the National Hurricane Center out of Miami. The intensity forecasts are also a little different depending on what models you look at. There are models that continue to take this a little bit farther north and as a potential landfalling hurricane near the Miami area, shooting back out into the Gulf. And then some intensity uncertainty once it reemerges into the Gulf, and of course, where it's actually going to go. There is an advancing cold front, which is sort of what's driving this. There's a high pressure area over the Bahamas, which is that first curve you see outward to the west and into the Gulf, and then the S curve maneuver it does to come back over Florida is because of an approaching frontal system. So it's all predicated on the timing of this for exactly where it will go and how intense it will be. But needless to say, you know, tomorrow we supposedly have the crew arriving at 2 p.m. and then we've got a Falcon 9 that needs to be hauled out to the launch pad. We have static fire that needs to happen. We have launch day run-throughs and rehearsals with the crew where they're not fueling the vehicle, but they're on 39A. An interesting thing that we learned earlier this year from talking with the 45th Space Wing on the weather side during one of their weather briefings and weather tours for us is that they can technically static fire a Falcon 9 in the middle of a thunderstorm because the lightning protection system will protect it from lightning strikes, and because it's not leaving the launch pad, you can technically static fire in a thunderstorm. Now, just because they technically can doesn't necessarily mean NASA would want them to on such an important mission as Crew 1. But that's sort of the weather situation we're in. We don't have a great deal of confidence in timing on this yet, exactly where it will be or how quickly it will shoot out of here once the cold front does arrive. So welcome to launch week in Florida with the bonus of hurricane and tropical storm Ada. What a hurricane season it's been.
You know, as someone who's not from Florida, or not even from the country, but a lot of people over here are surprised by how many hurricane alerts are around, how many hurricanes have been.
Yep.
Is this year just a crazy year, or has it been some advancing cycle of more and more hurricanes?
Yeah, this year has shattered all of the records.
Wow.
The previous record we got to was, in terms of names, was, this gets a little bit complicated, but it was in 2005. The name we got to was Zeta, which this year we had the second occurrence of getting to the Zeta name. That is the one that went into Louisiana and Mississippi and affected the SLS core stage. So Ada is as far as we've gotten on the naming scheme. Now, 2005 was weird because during post-season analysis, they found one that they missed. So we should have gotten to Ada in 2005, but we didn't because they missed it. So technically tied in terms of number of named storms, but very unusual. We don't normally get past our normal alphabet of named storms, which ends at W. So this is only the second time in history we've gotten to the Greek alphabet and the farthest we've gotten in it. So very unusual. But in terms of the time of year that we're in, this is a very typical storm for what we would be seeing. Ones that are in the Caribbean Gulf area, projected to be tropical storms, maybe Category 1 hurricanes, and these cross-peninsula storms that either shoot across South Florida into the Gulf or shoot from the Gulf across the East Coast into the Atlantic. So it's following a very typical pattern for this time of year, but the fact that this is the 20-something some odd named storm, very unusual. And it's not over yet. But you can see the watches and the warnings we have, and the fact that Cape Canaveral and the Kennedy Space Center are already under watches at this point, tropical storm watches at this point for midweek, and we saw the Atlas come back into the vertical integration facility. The other thing with this storm to remember, its wind field will be very compact, but its rain shield is gigantic. So even coming ashore in South Florida, even if it ends up doing exactly what this patch sort of shows it doing, of coming ashore in South Florida and then rehooking and then coming across northern Florida, it's going to be a major precipitation and wind impact to the Kennedy Space Center this week as well. So that's what we're primarily going to be looking for.
Gotcha.
Yes. And wants to visit
I'm
Atlantis
continuing to like flip
and the
switches
shuttle
and
landing
stuff like that in the
facility.
background here. So
Oh, we have that up. Excellent, excellent. Yes, yeah. I think that's the perfect comment. And
Yeah.
thanks for the $5, Seth, with it.
It's an interesting question here I want to just take, which we'll skip around because we don't have too many details. But there was a question here asking about the change where a SpaceX software engineer had gone to work for Boeing. That's some real headhunting from Boeing's part, because they have gone and literally acknowledged the fact that they've got software problems and they've gone to their rival company, technically their rival company, to headhunt their best. And well, we don't know if he's the best, but he's one of their top software engineers. A few ways to look at this. One is that it's good news for Starliner, because obviously they're looking at problems which they've got still, and they're looking to solve them with the best talent out there, and not being too upset by the fact they may look a little bit daft by going to SpaceX for that person to solve their problems. The second thing is SpaceX have obviously been able to just say, well, fair enough, all the best to you, rather than saying, we'll give you so much money not to worry about. You know, they probably got a large enough team at SpaceX to be able to say, well, you know, we're okay, you can go on, all the best. And as far as the person himself, I don't think there'd be some like mega money offer. I think that person's probably just interested in challenges. When you get to that kind of position, you'd be on enough money anyway, not to worry about it. So that's all we really know. We just know from the press release that Boeing have taken him and secured him and created a new position for him to fill, to be able to achieve the things he wants. So you can imagine the conversation that's gone on there. He said, well, you know, I'll come over here if you allow me to set up this team and to run it this way. And I think that'll only benefit Starline in the long run.
Indeed. And I think optically, not just for the company in fixing the software issues and doing what was best for Starliner, but optically, that's a huge bonus for them too. Like you were saying, of not being afraid of what that admission kind of is, but also going after the best person regardless of who they are. So yeah. I hope for a lot of people who were still nervous about Starliner, and of course we have OFT2 coming up in, as early as January, 2 months from now. I hope that really does put to bed the questions that people had about how serious Boeing was taking this. And the answer is they've been taking it very, very seriously. And I think this is a very good public way of reinforcing that as well. Yeah. Yeah. But while we're on Starliner, and since we were talking about Crew 1 as well, we had a question here from Martin Smith, who was asking specifically about Crew 1, is if this is the first time that a rocket will take off with more than 3 astronauts on board. If you mean, if you mean specifically a rocket, no. The space shuttle routinely launched with 5, 6, 7, and one time even 8 people on board, and normal crew complements were either 6 or 7, especially in the space station's eras for Mir and ISS. But if you mean capsule, the answer is yes. It's the first time that a capsule will launch with more than 3 people on board. And of course, Dragon and Starliner are both capable of, under normal missions, carrying 4 people and a maximum of 7 inside of them.
I wonder what vehicle that was, Chris, by the way, which carried more than 4 people.
Yeah, I wonder. Yeah, although that's probably something they don't want us to go off on, right?
Let's show 15 pictures of the shuttle from now on.
Yeah, right.
The rest of the show, yeah.
Isn't that other orbital class reusable vehicle that flew, I don't know how many hundreds of times? Like, what is
yeah, I've heard of it.
It's the one sticking up above my head.
There you go.
Chris being mode initiated. Yeah, I'll tell you one thing, guys. If you got questions, I've seen lots of questions in chat, but we can't read them live because they'll just scroll up after the screen. Do at NASASpaceflight, and then the question will go into this little panel thing we've got here, and we can just read them off the panel. So that's the easy way of asking questions. Otherwise, we'll miss them, or my memory will not remember what you asked me. So it's best if you just basically just put them into the at NASASpaceflight element.
Like when you tag us, like if you tag at NASASpaceflight, there's like some software that Michael wrote that pulls your chat out and puts it in a queue for us. If you just ask a question, you're like, "Hey, what color is the sky?" It just scrolls past, right?
It's blue.
Yeah, so thank you. But if you tag us, tag us, ask a question, then it goes into a queue and we can more easily pull it out. So, okay.
And by the way, guys, this is not a launch. People keep asking when the launch is and why is it scrubbed or not. This is a show. This is not a launch.
Yeah, this is
I
our
could
weekly
pretend to
live
rock
show.
if you want.
I mean, I could play. I have footage of the GPS 3 launch that we could bring up.
Yeah, we could do that. That's a segue,
Let's
isn't it?
go live and see the launch that happened a couple days ago. At this point, see, look, somebody's going to have to make rocket noises though. Like one of you is going to have to make the audio for the launch.
I've embarrassed myself enough live.
Oh wait, there's a sound delay. This is 10 miles away. But this is video from the fleet cam that's over at Port Canaveral. That was the GPS 3 launch. This is Michael Baylor robotically controlling this camera to track the launch. Still working on dialing in the exact settings and stuff for the camera to make it maybe not blow out as much. But anyways, this successfully happened.
That's amazing because fleet cam, we knew what fleet cam was for. It's for like tracking the ships, the drone ships, the fairing couches, whatever.
Yep.
Did we actually envision it before we put it in there that we'll be able to see the pads and even see this kind of view from the launch? Did we think about that in advance, or is it just going to burn us?
We thought that we might be able to see launches because if you're anywhere around just the Cape, it's hard to hide a rocket that's launched, right? Like you're not very deep. So we thought we might be able to see it. Yeah, with the clouds, even the contrast in the clouds. But we didn't know that we were going to be able to use it this much. Like we thought we were just going to catch the boosters and maybe the fairing ships coming back and forth. But
the beauty of this is now you get some. I always like the perspective because you get the TV cameras, you get the close-up shots, the booster shots, and they're all amazing, like the live TV, the official webcasts, whatever.
Yep.
What people who aren't from the area don't appreciate is what a rocket launch looks like if you step outside your door from 10 miles away. And that's amazing. That about 10 seconds ago, that view with the clouds in contrast.
Yeah.
That's what someone in Port Canaveral stepping outside of Rusty's after getting their
Like
favorite lunch. Yeah. They've stepped outside of Rusty's onto the balcony. They'll see that view. That's what they'll actually see.
And
that to me is crazy.
And the people around you are lit up so clearly by the light of the rocket. It's incredible. Yeah.
Especially the nighttime launches. Like I say, the nighttime launches, it's almost like that a sun rises all of a sudden because it lights you up and casts shadows behind you. You 100% see your shadow from the rocket, So.
Oh, yeah.
Falcon 9. Imagine what an NSF be like, or even, Heavy or anything like that, or Starship.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah. Yeah.
And I wonder. I don't know if I've set this up yet or not, but y'all talk a little bit more because we still have the fleet cam video as well. Earlier today, we saw the fairings come back in.
Oh yeah.
Let's see if we have.
Well, yeah. So I guess let's talk about the GPS mission because this one ended up becoming slightly more important than its original intent was back when the Air Force, now Space Force, contracted with SpaceX for this flight. Not only from a SpaceX perspective and a GPS perspective was it the final GPS mission that had to go on a brand new booster. All the rest of them have been cleared to go on flight proven first stages of the Falcon 9 at this point. But because of its delay and because of the gas generator issue and also the delay to the Sentinel-6A mission out of Vandenberg, this was the final one and the only one that proves with flight data the engine fix they were able to do with the gas generators prior to Crew 1. So this one actually became a sort of a shepherd for the crew mission, improving out something that NASA just wanted to see a bit of flight data from the engines for, and have gotten no indication that they saw anything on the GPS flight that was an issue or that would preclude the flight readiness reviews and the launch readiness reviews for for Crew 1, including its static fire and the eventual liftoff here targeted for next Saturday. So a good mission, and the GPS was in orbit, and here we can see the fairing catcher ship because DOS, correct me if I'm wrong, but one landed in the net and one got scooped out of the water, correct? Or one was definitely in the net when it came back in today, right?
So we saw one in what I think was the scoop net earlier today, and then one sort of on the back of the ship. This is live. I
Okay,
was just
yes.
testing in the live fleet cam video from Port Canaveral. So this is right across from Rusty's. One was definitely in what I think was the scoop net, like the smaller net.
Okay.
And
The
we
scoop
did
net,
not
gotcha.
see the larger net out there. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I didn't. They did not have the big net up when they came into port. It was just the smaller net that's sort of like almost just the size of the fairing. And we saw them out there at Port Canaveral working with the fairings, but the winds were so high you could even see that flag blowing up on the top of Mischief there. That flag, it looks like they started to rig the fairings to offload them, and then they shut everything down and everybody went away, just maybe because the winds were so high. But the other thing that I saw on these, you see how that one fairing is sort of scorched? What do you think that's from? Because the other one's not that way. I'm going to see if I can zoom in on it real quick here. I mean, you could guess what it's from while I'm
Yeah.
while I'm doing that.
You know, one of the things is, as you're zooming in, one of the things that with the payload fairings, right, is that even though they're jettisoned outside of the majority of the dense lower atmosphere there, they do have quite a bit of thermal stress that they go through, and it's not just the thermal stresses of the separation, and when they come back in under non-recoverable scenarios. The vast majority of their thermal heat is at liftoff, and as the vehicle is accelerating through the dense stages of the lower atmosphere, and then as well when they pop off, depending on exactly their orientation as they're released from the top of the payload fairing. And you can see this in some of the videos SpaceX has released from inside the fairings as they separate. They have to pass through the exhaust plume of the firing second stage, so
Right.
they can get scorched that way as they as they separate as well. And then of course, you know, those parafoils don't deploy instantly, so they do have some form of heating that they do experience as they come back into the denser lower levels of the atmosphere before the parafoils pop and deploy for their splashdown and guidance toward the recovery vessels.
Yeah, and look at the wind out there. I mean, it actually looks like the fairing is rocking back and forth a little bit on the boat. I don't know if that's an optical illusion.
It's what I see too, Das. If it's an optical illusion, it's getting all of us. But this would not be surprising. Yeah, because
Looks
there's a
stable to me.
huge surface area. Because there's a huge surface area there, right? That the wind can pick up to roll them around on the deck of the recovery ship there, and you can see it's very, very windy here.
Yeah.
Or down there today, I should say.
Gotcha. Well, anyways, I had that piped through, and then I brought it up a little bit sooner than I thought I was going to bring it up. But that's we're sort of standing by waiting for them to offload these things on the fleet cam. We've been watching for that. We saw them come back in, and I got the impression that they sort of slowed down the process of getting the fairings, because they pick them up with the crane, take them over on the dock, and they roll them off on these little special cradle trucks, right? But I sort of got the impression they were sort of holding off on that because the wind is so crazy out there right now.
I mean, which would make sense because, again, they're big surface area. I mean, those things can become sails pretty quickly.
Yeah. So I'm going to set the camera back to where it was before. And even the water, you can see the water sort of, not choppy, I guess, but just going by. There's a lot of wind out there.
Yeah, there really is. This is, hey, you know, as we prepare, this isn't Ada, to be clear. This is just the onshore flow as the high and the front and the low pressure area of the storm are all sort of converging and squeezing the gradient lines here,
right?
For us. But that's what you're seeing. It's not actually Tropical Storm Ada. At this point, Ada is still well south of Cuba from us.
Gotcha.
I wonder, Daz, can you play audio? Video if I link it to you.
I can. Yes. What do you want me to do?
The reason is I'm going to read out some questions, but I wanted to preempt this because it's a question I know an answer to, which is from Martin Smith, who asks, what was the loudest Falcon 9 space shuttle? I can guarantee you it was space shuttle because of two things, the two solid rocket boosters on either side. And if I give you this link, Daz, 1 second.
Yep.
It's one of our friends, so we can play it. I've linked it timestamped. It's from the press site of a night launch, Discovery night launch, an STS-92. It is by far the least watched but best shuttle video ever because it captures the sound, setting off car alarms and just racketing the place. If you've experienced a Falcon 9 launch, you'll know the difference between this and that because STS-92's night launch, for some reason, I don't know if it was the atmosphere or it was just weather conditions of his night launch or the power of the boosters, but everything was just completely crazy in this launch. And this will answer the question to you straight away.
Yeah, let's see if I've done this correctly. We'll give it the old try here. That is back to the fleet cam. We will take that off and we will go back to here. So this is the video you gave me, Chris. Let me see if we can pipe this through.
I'll put it onto timestamp. There we go. Listen to the sound of the boosters coming down on the truck.
Does it have a relay?
That's the cracking of the air you get with the boosters, the side rocket boosters. They made a difference between the liquid engines. And the sound in the background is the car alarms being set off by the shockwave.
Wow.
He's a great guy. He's a Japanese guy. He's an L2 member of our forum, and he sent us these videos. And I found it on YouTube where he's got one on YouTube, and he just said he had the best microphones of the era. I remember him saying in a special setup back in the old, the older days of where there wasn't some technology for it. And you'll see chunks of solid rocket booster being the little chunks of propellant which didn't burn being chucked out of the boosters there.
Jeez.
Yeah.
So do you think that's an RS-25 thing, or do you think that's an SRB thing primarily?
SRB thing.
SRBs.
Yeah.
Because the SRBs were like
100%.
80-85% of the thrust at liftoff, even more.
More than that, yeah.
Yeah. But that's why the question of what's louder, I could immediately answer it because of the two solid rocket boosters, and that's where SLS is big interesting because SLS will be the same thing but with 4 RS-25s. So you got a little bit more noise there. So that's going to be just amazing to see.
And more remarkably more thrust and power coming out of the solid rockets on the SLS as well. Yeah, I mean, so that was 7 million pounds of thrust in the shuttle video. The SLS will do 8 million pounds of thrust at liftoff, and the Falcon 9 does 1.7, and the Falcon Heavy does 5.1. So you can see how I mean, yeah, shuttle is louder than any of the Falcon families. What I will say though is that there is a difference when you talk about brightness. The Falcon Heavy was remarkably brighter than the Space Shuttle at liftoff, which was surprising to a lot of people who had seen both of them.
Because the boosters should be the brightest. Yeah.
Yeah. But what is really cool about any of these videos, especially night videos, if you're zoomed out wide enough, there's always the potential when the sound reaches you to watch how utterly confused the wildlife gets for a few seconds. Because it's just night. All the birds are all hunkered down, sleep. Morning, sound. Oh, night again. Okay. And then they all just go back to sleep. Yeah.
It's crazy how animals, bugs, crickets, whatever, react to stuff like that. When I saw the eclipse come through, right? A couple years back, the eclipse happened, and it's the middle of the day. The animals you think would have some sort of clock, but the eclipse happens, and all of a sudden the crickets start chirping. In the middle of the day, it's like, wait, what? They take cues from these other things. I mean, the light of a rocket launch, the moon shadow going over, and all of a sudden, crickets. It gets colder, and then crickets start chirping. The sun comes. Well, the sun doesn't really come back out. The moon gets out of the way, and then they all shut up. They're like, oh, wait a second, that's not the right time. The same sort of thing with the rocket launches. It's almost like a human-made sunrise that occurs, right?
Well, it is, and this is one of the interesting things that can be difficult to describe. So we always hear about night launches turning night into day, right? Where sometimes, and solid rockets can really do this across the board, where the sky around the vehicle will even start to turn a little bit of a shade of blue because the light is that powerful and the reflection off the ocean and everything like that. But equally, the one you just showed for STS-92 and STS-119, another Discovery mission that launched just after sunset, it can be the exact opposite, where the sky is nice and gray and doing its normal sunset pattern behind the vehicle. And if you get those evening liftoffs, the solids will turn day into night and will just black out everything from your eyes' perspective to to see color because they're just so blinding and everything. So it's what you were saying, Doss. It's no wonder that it's absolutely no wonder that animals have a hard time with that at first and freak out at first, thinking it's morning before before acclimating.
It is like a massive change. Like all of a sudden, it's super bright or was super bright, super loud, or whatever. But they pay attention, that's for sure.
I think we can fire through some of these questions because as soon as I said do NASA spaceflight for asking questions, we've got about 50 questions. So we're going to fire away through these. First of all, David asks, isn't it about time NASA capitalized on the research done on the ISS? All those experiments they do, it's called National Laboratory. And a lot of the testing, you can talk about this, Chris, where a lot of testing we don't really know about until we actually go in depth with it, like DNA and RNA testing with the astronaut up there right now. Which on the second trip, isn't she?
Yeah, indeed. So you know, the science that gets performed on the International Space Station, it can be kind of tricky in terms of how it's released, because it's not, unless there's a huge breakthrough in things like what you were talking about, like when Kate Rubins was up a few years ago and became the first person to sequence DNA and RNA in space. That was a huge leap. Right, so that got reported on. But you have a bunch of other things that can still be proprietary, because the station can be used by companies to test proprietary things such as drugs and cancer delivery treatments and making fiber optic cables in space. So it can be a little hit or miss in terms of the data reviews and what can be released and what's proprietary and what's not. But all of the NASA-sponsored ones, all of the ones that are handled through the ISS National Lab do get released, and they do talk about those results. So when we talk about capitalizing off of the science returns, whether it's medical or geophysical or biological research, what NASA sort of capitalizes off of is in large part that understanding of the psychological conditions of working in space for long durations of time, which we know we're going to need for the Moon and Mars. What NASA capitalizes on is that on the health of astronauts on board the space station for prolonged periods of time, that we can then extrapolate outward to better understand the health benefits of these long-term missions that we're talking about. What NASA doesn't directly benefit from, as your question is alluding to or capitalizing off of, are what private companies choose to use the space station for. NASA doesn't capitalize off of the medical research that is done by companies like Pfizer and the FDA as well. NASA doesn't capitalize off of a private company saying, hey, we want to use the space station to test to see if we can make fiber optic cables that are more efficient and of higher quality. NASA doesn't capitalize off of that because the space station is offered with no contractual obligation to benefit NASA. It just has to benefit humanity in some way. So that's how NASA sort of capitalizes off of what's done aboard the International Space Station, is that they really don't. It's us here on the ground. It's our everyday lives that benefit and capitalize off of the research we do on the station. And honestly, to me, it's one of the most beautiful things about the International Space Station, is that it doesn't have to give back to the corporations and the companies who built it. It's to give back to humanity.
Right.
It sounds a bit funny when we're talking about NASA going commercial and all the commercialization of NASA, and suddenly Chris talking about NASA being for humanity. it's funny because that's how it is. But a lot of people don't recognize that at all. They really don't think that way. They think it's either costs too much money, it's a waste of money, or it's they're not getting enough out of it. So it's amazing. But it's a little bit of a segue. Is a question here from Martin Smith asking: is it true a private company are developing a version of the space shuttle? No. There's vehicles that look like shuttles, but they're not shuttles. The nearest thing we've heard is Russia looking at developing a Buran 2, but we don't think it'd be like a Buran. It'd be like a smaller version, like a Dream Chaser version of Buran, So I don't think that'll come to pass because Russia likes to announce lots of projects and never go through with them. So the answer to that question is no. You will see things that look a little bit like shuttles, such as the Dream Chaser this world, such as maybe the Talon with Stratolaunch. That might be a bit of a shuttle-esque kind of lifting body design. but nothing will ever compete to the shuttle because it was a one-off vehicle that didn't really work properly in the aspects of what it was intended to be reused by. And that is another question I just want to bring up here with Giovanni Foulmouth. Is that your real name? I hope it is. Giovanni Foulmouth. We live in an era of reusable rockets. Is it possible for NASA to redesign SLS and make it reusable? Get more bang for the buck instead of throwing each of these such incredible engines away? No, it's not going to happen because redesigning SLS now would be a nightmare. They would cause schedule headaches beyond comprehension. The only thing they were looking at doing was recovering the booster at one point with chutes, but they took the chute system out of the boosters during Ares because Ares couldn't launch Orion and they had to save weight. And never put it back with SLS for some reason. We don't know why.
Actually, we did.
Capability. Yeah. The engines, the only way they're going to bring the engines back was on flyback on a shuttle C version of SLS, which was one of the proposed vehicles during the transition between Constellation and the SLS program. It was shuttle C where they had a flyback situation where the booster compartment, the engine compartment of the RS-25s would fall off and parachute back. That was quite wacky, but that never came to pass.
Yeah.
To answer your question, no, they'll never change SLS. Let's be an expendable vehicle from now on.
And to touch on that, because it was actually something I had forgotten, but it's something that I had asked Northrop Grumman years ago about why, when they switched back from Ares 1, which you were mentioning, right, is where the recovery systems were taken away from the solid rocket boosters for weight and mass savings. Why didn't they put them back on the SLS boosters? And the answer to that isn't necessarily a weight savings for them. It's because the new technology, the new ways they're building the casings for the SLS boosters that they'll have after they use up the shuttle stock, it's actually cheaper to build them all new again than to recover the system. And a lot of the sensors and a lot of the monitoring equipment that they have put on the field joints negates the necessity to recover them to make sure the O-rings aren't charred, that we're not experiencing something weird on like hot gas path penetration or things like that. It actually just came down to it's cheaper, more efficient, and actually safer to build them anew every single time. So once they got to that, why spend the millions of dollars on the recovery systems and the recovery boats and the personnel if you have no intention of reusing them? So that's actually where they wound to with the SLS.
That's breaking news, guys. Expendable is cheaper.
Expendable was cheaper in this case, yes.
Quick, someone at Elon that part. Just clip it and at Elon saying Chris Gebhardt has announced that expendable rockets are cheaper and easier, more viable.
I'm getting yelled at enough on social media today. Please don't say that. Yeah.
Oh no.
Hey, which I can answer, so I'm going to bring them up. We've got Richard Frost who asks, will they do a static fire, then pause and relight to test the relight after a static fire? I know what you mean by that. Will they do a static fire on Starship and then test the relight as if it's in flight, so like 2 minutes later then relight it? They're not planning to do that. But I remember a question like that coming up a few weeks ago, and I thought it was a great question because it is something they're going to have to do for the first time, where they launch on 3 Raptors and then they'll float back on the belly flop and they've got to relight the engine. If this Raptor doesn't relight with seconds to go to do the belly, to bring out the belly flop, bring it vertical for a landing, then the thing's going to crash. And that is a possibility. Elon said it might be a crater. It might end up in a crater. So you think maybe they want to test that relight on the pad, on the launch mount. And as far as we know, that's not a plan. They're going to do 3 separate static fires over a period of 3 or 4 days. So I do like that question, but I don't think they're going to do it.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, but doesn't that match what we saw with the Falcon 9 recovery things where they had a Grasshopper where they went up and down, but I don't remember them ever testing engine shutdown and relight on the Merlins before going for broke on the Falcon 9.
They absolutely didn't do it with Grasshopper. Yeah. And I don't remember any McGregor testing where they did relight straight away after initial static fire test. So you're right, they've not tested before. Maybe they're just confident, or they can't reproduce it on the mount. They might think there's no point us doing a relight test on the mount because the relight will all be about getting through the air. They're going to be
Right.
they're going to do this test in the air, so maybe that's to do with it.
Yeah.
Because you get like fuel sloshing around and that sort of stuff. Like, is that something
Yeah.
that's a critical part of the relight as opposed to we know we can turn the engines on and off again? Is the fuel going to be in the right spot? I don't know. It seems like it's something they test on the pad. I don't know.
Well, but
Yeah.
I mean that might be the key that we're seeing here with Starship, and this would be an educated guess, but full disclosure, it is purely what I'm speculating here. Is, you know, if the aerodynamics, and we have no reason to believe they're not, are very similar to the video Elon showed last, where this thing is belly flopping toward the ground. That's a very different orientation to be at for propellant loads and relights than the Falcon 9s, which are like this when their engines relight. So that could have something to do with it too, just the orientation of, hey, this is what we want to. I also just want to pause for a second to say, every single one of these pictures and videos from Mary has been outright outstanding, but the first two in particular, the eye that Mary has for just so historically evocative lighting and photos is unparalleled. That one. Yeah, that one. If that doesn't make you feel something, knowing that is a prototype for a ship that could take humans to the moon, that is part of a sustainable lunar architecture and part of taking us to another planet, I don't know what evokes emotion for you if that picture doesn't, because that is just gorgeous and epic on so many takes. And Mary, excellent eye. Excellent eye.
Totally agree. And while we're on that subject, we've got another Starship question I want to bring up while we're still seeing this view here from Martin Smith, who says, why test one engine? Surely they'll test if on all three engines. I think the question is basically trying to get the gist of. The reason is what we're starting to show with is they're going to do different static fire tests this time around. They're going to do one engine test from the header tanks as if it's the landing burn, and then two engines from the header tanks as if a landing burn. It's a different kind of thing. Remember, the engines will be used to flip it vertically and then land it. So that's what these header tank firings are about. They're about the second part of the test flight. The reason they're going to do a 3-engine test at the end of this static fire test campaign is because they removed one of the Raptor engines. SN39 was removed and replaced with SN36, and they need to do a 3-engine static fire test to make sure all 3 Raptors are happy, and then they can go and proceed towards the launch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that type, and what we were talking about earlier, right? I mean, bringing it full circle, when you said those engines are the ones that flip it from the belly flop to vertical, that's the thrust vector control system we were talking about earlier. Yep. And
also DD View, I know I've seen him around quite a lot. He asks, wouldn't an air raid type siren make more sense for Boca Chica over the police car driving around up and down Highway 4? What about like what he's using to the Cape? That's interesting, right? Well, first of all, I really miss the police siren. I think the deputy involved loves his job because he gets around flashing his lights and doing his siren like a crazy person. On the orders of a SpaceX, he'll be the first to know outside of SpaceX there's going to be a test in 10 minutes' time. I think he enjoys that too much for him to replace it with an air raid siren. Is there something similar at Cape Canaveral, do you know, guys, where they're going to do a test or something like that with a siren?
A siren?
With sirens, no. So sirens are used at the Cape if we have a bad day, an emergency, right? The alert to get to the to get indoors, to get to shelters, to get things like that. We don't normally blast sirens at Cape Canaveral for tests or for launches as well. That's usually just taken care of by the roadblocks and the notices that go out to Cape personnel.
Yeah, and the Cape is such a big area, right? Boca Chica is tiny compared to Cape Canaveral, and the public cannot get anywhere near the test facilities at the Cape like they can drive right up next to the fence at Boca Chica. So it makes sense, like just given that physical separation between the public and the launch pad. They have announcements and stuff like that. Like we'll hear announcements over loudspeakers and that sort of things, but no big air raid siren or anything like that at the Cape.
Well, and I think it's important, too, to remember that the primary reason they do that siren at Boca Chica is for the people who are still living in Boca Chica Village. Right. So there's also not a neighborhood situated 1.5 miles from 39A.
Right.
You know.
That'd be great.
And I would actually venture that once Boca Chica, and of course we know what the long-term plan for the houses in Boca Chica, but I would think that once we get to a point where it's just SpaceX personnel in that area, that we might see the sirens stop too, since that is primarily for the residents there.
Yeah, it's that the warning that says, come outside in case something blows up and showers you with glass is literally the warnings and the sirens. It's like, if you hear the siren, get outside. So if we blow something up, you don't get showered with glass inside your house. Like, I'm not even joking. That's what those sirens are for.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
God, good deal.
Yeah.
I mean, I've just been letting these videos roll. I mean, there's always so many good videos. Every time we do a NASA Spaceflight Live, we have 7 days of Boca Chica videos. Plus, we did a weekly update as well. So
and that view you're looking at right now is where that level is going to be where the star bar is. There's going to be a bar in that area. They're going to put a gantry, a crane, at some point below the top of that beam, which is where there's you see where the guys are on top of the green carriages. That area is going to be the bar. There's going to be a bar with viewing windows and everything like that. You'll get amazing views of launches and stuff. But
they better call it 10 forward.
Oh, they better
forward.
Invite Whoopi Goldberg to the first one.
Right. But yes, and so while we're showing that, there was another question here. We were talking about propulsive landings, and we were talking about the Boca Chica return of SN8 when it does its hop here. And Jeff Arrington wanted to know, sort of along those same lines, but on a different. When is the next RTLS Falcon 9 landing going to happen? So right now, that on the East Coast will be the NRL 108 mission that will follow Crew 1 no earlier than the 18th of November. That's a return to launch site landing at LZ1 for the Cape. And then shortly thereafter, on the 21st of November, the Sentinel 6A mission will do a return to launch site at Vandenberg. So actually 2 of the next 3 planned SpaceX missions are return to launch site, with the only drone ship landing being Crew 1 on the 14th.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and we got some super chats here too, as well as new memberships. Darium Hernandez, thanks so much for the new membership. Greatly appreciate that continued monthly support. Thank you so much. Tom Brooks with $5 saying, I look forward to NASA Spaceflight live streams every single week. Great work. Keep up the quality show. Thanks indeed, Tom. And thanks for the support as well. And then this is one very near and dear to my heart. So Claire Saunders with £5 saying, thank you to all of you. I love Fleet Cam. What's the sound of the dog barking every 5 minutes?
It's a dog bark that's every 5 minutes. I don't know what to tell you.
Yes.
I'm not a cat. You can show the dog.
See if we can find the dog on the cameras.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'll see if that's something we can do. We would have to sort of turn. There's certain parts of the area around Fleet Camp we try not to show, because it is a restaurant. There are public people dining there, so we try not to look certain directions. But I'll see if we can look enough over our shoulder to see wherever that audio of the dog is coming from.
Jack's cat B is pretty much now in the realm of needing a Twitter account due to fame. So I think we definitely need to start showing us. I need to get a pet. That's what I need. I need to get a horse.
There you go. You need to get a horse. The NASA Spaceflight horse mascot. Oh yeah, definitely. Live to the barn with, I don't know, what would you name your horse?
Horse purchase.
What would you name your horse?
You got me there. I'd have thought something funny if I was not half asleep. Leave that with me. I'll come back to that one.
Maybe like HLS or something, like horse launch.
Can't call a horse HLS.
You could, but you wouldn't.
Love it.
Call him Atlantis after the best shuttle.
There you go.
Yeah.
Ooh, no.
That's the song fact. It's best shuttle.
That's not a bad name for a horse. Atlantis. I've never heard of a horse named Atlantis.
The best shuttle. That's right. Yeah.
I like it. This is the end of the video. Time out.
Time for Christy to explode.
Oh well, I said boo. I'm gonna restrain myself.
I gotta get another video here. Sorry, let's go to the other HLS video since we were talking about.
See the end of the video because I think it showed a little advert for our Texas Tag Watcher merchandise.
It did.
It indeed. Yes.
Yeah, here you go. Look, it pops up and everything if you hover over that. You can even click on it.
Yeah, I saw it caught in my eye. I thought, oh, that's interesting. There's a merchandise shop, is there?
It is. There is a merch shop. Oh, I guess since the last time we've added some of these new photo prints.
Yes, we have.
Because Chris was talking about the amazing views Mary gets, the eye she's got. No, it's just the fact that she's filming the events and the news. She's now filming not just that, but visually amazing things.
Yeah.
Because they are pictures of she's taken,
I love the
and they are
reflection.
amazing.
When you get the reflection, the water that's so smooth in the morning, there's no wind or anything like that. It's like a mirror, and you get this sort of reflection of whatever it is. Starship,
It
most
was
of
a
the time.
shameless plug, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Just suddenly shameless plug. That's okay.
Yeah.
She's got a couple of them like that. Look at
have
the
no
look at the
shame.
reflection there. Nice. They got to pay the bills, right?
Yeah.
Oh, geez. But there's that. I'm just rolling the video. I'm grabbing stuff. If there's anything that I haven't brought up on the screen that we wanted to talk about, I know we talked some about the HLS stuff, and this is actually the midsection for SN11.
That's right. Yeah, that's the nurse code for it.
Oh my
With the
god.
NASA worm as well, which is great to see.
They did. Somebody ran out there and painted the NASA worm on the
Yeah.
side of it. So
But internally, it's been interesting. I mean, that is literally just a spare nurse cone that's been painted. Let's face it, it's not. They've not built anything from specially for this. They've got all these spare nose cones. They scrapped some of them and kept one of them, and they've put it on top of a firing section. And inside, you can see that they put it onto a mount. So inside, they can now access it, and they can build out platforms, and you can have literally a model of a human landing system Starship that people can walk around and see about. Just look at that guy stepping under there. You get an idea of scale, because people say, how can they fit so much stuff inside a nurse cone? They're deceptively large.
yeah,
They really are
they are big.
deceptively large. Yeah. And when you see workers underneath them and just popping inside and popping in and out of them, you get an idea of how they can fit so much inside one of these nurse cones. So yeah, I would be interested to see if they do outfit it properly, and if Elon will take some videos of it.
What you said about them being deceptively small, all of Starship is deceptively small until you can physically see it with your own eyes. I mean, even when you see people for scale, you don't really get a sense for the sheer size of this system until you're standing by it. It's incredible, and that's one of the very hard things to tell from photos and videos is the scale of what we're talking about here, because Starship is massive. Oh my lord!
You've been there to Mark 1 when his presentation, so you've been to see Mark 1 in real, and that's the same. Obviously, it's not the vehicle we're seeing now. SN6 is much more flight worthy, but for scale, you've been next to Mark 1, so you can appreciate how that will feel in real life, where the rest of us have got the videos and get rough ideas from seeing people walk around. So yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah, I mean the thing that really hit home for me before we were there was last year, driving out to it for the first time at sunrise. When we came around, when we came around a curve, I was in a car with Rob C. Mangle and Pauline Acklin, and they both said when we came around the curve, that's it. And I looked off into the distance and saw something sticking up in the horizon, and then looked at the GPS, and we were still 14 miles away from it and could see it clear as day. And that was just what you see in the photos right now. This doesn't include the super heavy booster, which is 2.5 times as tall.
Yeah.
It's mind-boggling. Yeah.
You know what gets me? I think that Starship looks smaller now. Right? When they put the nose cone and they put the forward fins and they sort of stacked SN8 together, every time I see it, I'm like, oh, it doesn't look so big. I don't know why this sort of mental switch has happened in my head, where the act of putting the forward section on it, the payload section, the forward fins and stuff, made it seem smaller to me. Did anybody else? Did that happen to anybody else? It looks
kind of, because of the aero surfaces. Like you said, the aero surfaces just the break the view of the tallness of it, so that's probably what it is.
Yeah. It's it is when you start building things outward on rockets, it does have that very weird visual effect of making them look shorter, exactly like what you said. Yeah,
it's like, oh, it's like a little rocket ship. Oh yeah, that's not that big. And until you see somebody next to it, like somebody on a lift or something, then all of a sudden you're like, wait a second, what is that? It looks like a little toy rocket ship now, and it's not. It's a big rocket ship.
But I do want to go back to and kind of circle back to a question that we had earlier, where Chris, you were answering the question like, who else is making a space shuttle, right? And we talked about the sort of weird message out of Russia, potentially the resurrection of the Buran, which I don't think any of us are holding our breath for. But there's a slightly different question that gets asked a lot of the time of like what, and I know on our forums, like what would the shuttle look like if we were designing it today, right? For all the same purposes that they had originally envisioned in the late 60s and early 70s for it. I'd argue you're looking at it
Starship.
right here. Yeah.
No, you're completely right.
Yeah.
It's modern technology with a drive of a billionaire owner of this chief designer. In fact, we keep thinking of Elon as the guy, the money man, the guy who's who runs it, who owns it. He's actually a chief designer as well. So his visions are not being laid down to a separate team. He is in the middle of this, and that's what really motivates things to go forward. It's not just the design, it's not just the advances, it's the drive. We joke about Elon's whip.
Yeah.
He's there, he's motivated, he wants this to happen, and it sets up a cadence that we've never seen before. And as you said, this is a reusable vehicle, but a viable reusable vehicle, and one that can launch backwards and forth. Where a space shuttle had that idea of being that fast turnaround transportation system, but was the design let it down. It was too complicated. This is just steel rings, tanks, and space at the top, and that's what makes it work. So I think it's fascinating. This is like Shuttle 2.0 that no one ever envisioned would be Shuttle 2.0.
Right, and doing exactly what you just said. I mean, how many times does Elon keep saying that the goal is you reach a state and then you start asking yourself, how can I unengineer this? How can I make it less complicated? And I mean, just what we're seeing here. I mean, that's the launch pad. I mean, nothing that moves to a Kennedy Space Center launch pad is that simple.
Is that a train at your house, Chris?
It's a train.
Okay. I heard the shuttle gods talking in the background, but it wasn't me.
Yes,
the train all of a sudden, like, what is that?
Yes,
go ahead, sorry.
That's the 4:30 train going by. But no, I mean, my point is, look at these launch stands, look at this launch equipment, look at how simplistic it is, right? And then if we were to roll the video back, we don't have to do this. But what I love, go back to a little bit to that, a little bit more to the one more frame when we see the Starship in it. Actually,
okay. Yeah, tell me what you want. There you go.
Yes, so back a little bit more from that.
Back a bit.
There we go.
There you go.
Okay.
All right.
This is what I think SpaceX does really well. That looks like a computer generated render to me. I mean, it doesn't look real. That one also doesn't look real, aside from the simple fact that things are moving around it. When you watch the Falcon 9s come back and land, when you watch the Falcon Heavy side course come back and do their Olympic-style synchronized landings, it doesn't look real, but it is. And this is where I think, our technology has gotten us to this point as well, but so has ingenuity of taking those things that were like, well, what's the dream? Like, what would we love them to do? And then going, okay, let's do it. And not accepting no for an answer if the reason we're saying no is, well, we just think it's hard, we haven't tried, right? This is what I love about all of what we're seeing now in a lot of the pushes across the board is it's okay to fail. It's okay to try something, have it not work, and say, okay, how do we fix it and how do we make it better? But what I love about the current era we're back in for spaceflight is that we don't just simply accept no, it's too hard as an answer. You've got to have facts to back that up as to why the answer should be no. And I think that's only going to behoove us going forward and across the board in this industry.
I'm just jumping over to more pictures.
Yeah.
I mean, look at that.
Look at that.
Somebody zoom in on that. There you go.
Yeah.
If you zoom back out again, you can see Starhopper for scale.
But I'm not actually doing the zoom. It's the video, Chris.
Oh, I thought you were doing the zoom, Das.
No, I wasn't doing the zoom. I'm just playing the video. Sorry. There's Starhopper. There's Starhopper.
It wasn't even Mary. It was the editor. I think it was Nick, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it was an editing.
Look on the right hand
zoom.
side. You got Starhopper on the right hand side. That gives you some more scale as well.
Sorry. God. Somebody over on the Twitch side said that it looks skinnier now. So when it was just the tank, the aft section with the fuel tanks and the engines, it looked a little bit chubbier just because it wasn't so long. And now that it's longer, it looks skinnier, which makes me think that it looks smaller. I think that may be a lot of what's going on in my head, especially from this angle. This sort of removes the fins, and it looks skinny now because it's the right length, I guess, as opposed to before it was sort of just half or 60% of a Starship or whatever.
What I hope they really do, because we're talking about this size comparison, I really hope the first time a Super Heavy test, silo goes out to the pad, that they also have, that they also have a completed Starship like we're seeing now on the other one, and Starhopper there, because that's one heck of a family photo to get for the size increase of them all. Yeah.
That's still, I mean, Super Heavy going down the road or whatever they're going to do is going to be straight up insane. Like, I don't know what they're doing with it, but whatever it is going to be crazy. It's too big.
Right?
Too big. God.
But man, oh man. I'm just kind of looking.
I think we're going to run out of time, so we need to do the super chats before we finish off. So we're going to make sure they don't left out, because I think one of them is on topic here. First of all, Wes Flight, new membership. Thank you very much. Always appreciate the memberships. Memberships are always like long-term support, because you're doing like commitment towards it rather than just a one-off. So we really appreciate that. But Bamba Booba Booba, okay. I've got a screen where it's chopped up here. Bamba Booba, I think it is. I'm in my RV 5.5 miles from the launch pad across the inlet with an unobstructed view. I heard there'll be a 5-mile evacuation zone. Now, if that's true, that'd be interesting, won't it? I don't know how far 5 miles is as far as what Mary normally does, but
so Mary's
I don't think they've announced it yet.
Yeah. So here's what I would say. I think 5 miles could potentially be true when they start some of the larger test campaigns on this, right? Because because there's a lot of uncertainty, right? And for absolutely as incredible as SpaceX is with their software and for flight, it's ultimately the first time you fly that on an actual vehicle. You're going to want to be a lot more careful than you will be in actual operations. I think you'll eventually see that exclusion miles shrink. I think you'll eventually see it shrink down to at least 3 miles. And the reason I say that is because the 39A Starship launch site is 3 miles from the vehicle assembly building and press site. Right. And you can't shut down an industrial area at the Kennedy Space Center just because you're launching from 39A. So eventually they've got to get that exclusion zone down to 3 miles. And I think they want to get it even smaller than that. But 5 miles wouldn't surprise me for the first go and the first rounds of these tests, especially something falling from 15 kilometers. You want a pretty good exclusion zone in case that thing hits the ground again.
Yeah, the other part of it is the way that Boca Chica works. There's not really, it's not like there's land 360 degrees around it, right? So South Padre Island's 5-something miles away, but even if you're going up the road that goes to Boca Chica, you really can't see anything for most of that road, right? So it's not like, 3.5 versus 4. The public can only get so close. And I think if you're going out there to watch that hop, South Padre Island is the place to be. You don't want to try and get over on the main road on the other side, and I don't think you're going to get as close there as you are over on South Padre Island. So that's probably for the public coming to try and watch things. South Padre Island, where you got the RV, Bama. I got your back there. It's Chris. I'm pretty sure that Bubba is from Alabama, if I had to guess. Here.
I would too. Yes, Bama.
His name is Bubba.
Bama Bubba. Yeah.
Bama. Yeah, that's probably the right.
Like Forrest Gump, Bubba Gum.
Yes.
That's the second part of it. You got it. There you go.
There we go.
So I do think that South Padre Island is probably the place to go. I think that it could cause problems if a lot of members of the public try to cram up the road and they're on the sides of the road. There's no median on the side of the road or anything like that. It goes straight down to ditches and stuff. So if you're going down there to try and see the hop, where you have your RV right now is probably over on South Padre. That's probably the right place to see it right now. So anyways, we got a couple more super chats that came in. One from David Oliveros. And really quickly, if we grab this one, do we know anything more about the TPS tiles? I remember several of them falling off during the 150 kilometer hops, 150 meter hops. What have they done to address the tiles falling off? Do we have any new information on that either?
No, we just know the machine, they're attached by a machine, the pin machine, and they've been doing little test samples on SN5, SN6. I'm not entirely sure how much is on SN8. But they've done tests on rings at the production site in the pattern of an X, and they seem to be well placed and well machined in. But I think they'll do on a future test, they'll do some TPS shake-off testing where they'll see what they're like with the dynamics of aerodynamics of it, and then before they go to an orbital launch, we'll need
we go.
them. So yeah, I think we'll wait and see on that right now, and we'll watch out for test areas. There's a test area on SN8. There you go. So we can
so
see the
it's
TPS
frantically
towers on
scrubbing.
SN. Yeah, it's another patch just like SN5, SN6. I think
Yeah.
that's just to check the machine attachment points and see how they perform in the environment of a launch.
Yeah, I mean, I think they have a long way. Like, what's a long way even mean anymore, right? But
Yeah.
since SN8 isn't going orbital, it doesn't really matter to SN8 itself whether or not the tiles stay attached. But they can certainly see, do the tiles fall off when they try to launch it? Clearly, that wouldn't be a good thing. They definitely need to keep making improvements to however they're doing these things. Let me scroll it back to see the tiles again. But since SN8 is not going orbital, whether or not the tiles stay attached aren't critical to SN8 itself. Right? Like a tile falling off is not going to cause SN8 to totally fail. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. But they do need to, they'll get to the point where that becomes a critical sort of block in the path where this has to be ready to go, or else the Starship won't survive reentry, whatever, right? But SN8, not quite there yet. Back one more time. And then one more other super chat from David Sharp here. David says, thanks for the good work. We appreciate the support there, David. Thank you so much for the kind words. But that gets us to the end of the super chat queue. Chris G, Chris B, is there anything that we haven't talked about that we wanted to cover? We started a little late. We're a little bit over time now, but making it up as we go. Did we miss anything?
No, if you could throw that link though to the updated path for Ada, we didn't miss anything. I just want to show the updated path for people because it is slowing down in this latest update. So that other curve that you're seeing is now that recurve back toward the Florida Peninsula and Tampa there. Now happening a bit further south, but you can also see that hurricane watches have also been issued. So they do expect this to intensify back into a hurricane after it comes over Cuba now, based on the watches that have been issued. And you can see two tropical storm watches still encompassing Cape Canaveral and the Kennedy Space Center, but that hook back toward Florida being further to the south could, in this particular update, be indicating that that cold front is going to pick it up sooner and actually bring it a much closer path to the Kennedy Space Center on Friday or Saturday, depending on how quickly that cold front picks it up. So we're going to monitor this, but this is the latest path update as of the 5 p.m. update, or the 4 p.m. update from the National Hurricane Center out of Miami.
And of course, this affecting a couple different launches. It's already pushed back 101, right? The United Launch Alliance, they actually were rolling that out, and they rolled it back in to batten it down into the VIF, the Vertical Integration Facility with United Launch Alliance there. Hopefully, it doesn't affect Crew 1. It is in the area. I mean, this goes all the way out to Wednesday, showing the tropical storm on the Gulf side of Florida.
So it technically goes to Thursday. What they're not showing for timing is that 1 p.m. Tuesday, and then 1 p.m. Wednesday is the center dot of that reef hook, and then the top dot is Thursday.
Is 1 a.m. Thursday or 1 p.m.
Something like that, either 1 a.m. or 1 p.m. on Tuesday. So you can see how slow down it is from the previous graphic. Yeah,
gotcha. So again, that's affecting multiple things. We'll keep watching what's going on with Crew 1. That's the big one that we want to go, that first operational crew mission. But I think that sort of brings us to the end of SN8 Live. Wait, what? Sure. SNL Live? What show are we on? NSF Live is the name of the show that we're on. I think that brings us to the end of the show today. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us with our show. We always do these live shows. Try to do them every Saturday unless so much other stuff is going on that we literally just can't field enough warm bodies to make the show happen. But we do appreciate everybody showing up. Let me say thanks to the members really quickly. We do this every time. But here are our members, all the way up to the point where we can't even read out the list of names. The launch directors and the flight engineers were able to keep doing these shows because y'all keep showing up. You keep supporting us, either with the memberships, the super chats, buying merch from the store, letting ads roll, whatever it is, liking and subscribing. I don't even know. But we appreciate all the support we get from our members. Really quickly, our special guest subject matter experts today. Over on this side, we've got Chris Bergin, NASA Spaceflight actual guy who founded NASA Spaceflight. Chris, thank you so much for the time.
Always a pleasure.
Excellent. You can find him on Twitter at NASASpaceflight, says it up there in the corner. And then on the other side, over here, hailing from Florida, Chris Gebhardt, assistant managing editor for NASA Spaceflight. Chris, thank you so much.
It's a pleasure, and I'm glad to be back too.
All righty. You can find Chris over on Twitter at Chris G. This way, _NSF is Chris G's Twitter. I'm John Galloway with NASA Spaceflight. If you're watching over on Twitch, you may know me as DOS, but I am the one whose fault it is whenever the live stream doesn't work correctly like we started today. So I'll be doing some more work here, trying to figure out what happened with the OBS update so that we can have our audio and video actually synchronized when the stream starts. It's better now. Is it better now? Like... Anyways, that is going to do it for NSF Live this evening. Be on the lookout for live streams coming up. We know we've got that booster coming back into port, so we would use Fleet Cam to cover that. Sort of shaky timing there because of the tropical storm and the weather conditions coming through. Can't tell you exactly when that's going to happen. Launches that come up, of course, we're planning a big thing for the Crew 1 launch that's coming up. We'll have a crew out there operating cameras and doing commentary and all sorts of stuff. And then all the testing that's happening at Boca Chica as well, wherever those windows end up falling. We will be bringing you some live streams from there, courtesy of Mary, Boca Chica gal, and the daily videos as well. You'll see the daily videos every day coming out of Boca Chica. All that stuff you can find right here on the NASA Spaceflight channel. But for now, we're going to go ahead and call the stream for today. And thank y'all so much for the support. We will see y'all later.